Victoria had been working for the Montgomery family for 3 years now. 3 long years of waking up at 6 in the morning, preparing breakfast for 2 energetic 10-year-old twins, and making sure their school uniforms were pressed and ready. She lived in a small room on the 3rd floor of their massive penthouse, and honestly, she couldn't complain. The pay was good, the family treated her with respect, and the children were sweet kids despite growing up with more money than most people see in a lifetime. But something felt hollow inside her. Something she tried not to think about while folding laundry or helping with homework. It was a regular Saturday afternoon when everything changed. Mr. Montgomery was in Singapore for some tech conference, and Mrs. Montgomery had flown to Paris for a Fashion Week event. This was normal. Victoria had grown used to being alone with the twins more often than their actual parents were. She didn't judge them for it, not really. Rich people had rich people problems, and someone had to keep the money flowing, right? The twins, Lily and Benjamin, had been begging her all morning to take them to the mall. They needed new shoes for school, and apparently, the ones they had were totally last season, according to Lily. Victoria didn't understand fashion the way these kids did, but she grabbed her purse and shepherded them into the family's second car, a Mercedes that probably cost more than everything Victoria had owned in her entire life. The mall was packed, as it always was on weekends. Families everywhere. Teenagers hanging out in groups, the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee mixing in the air. Benjamin held her hand as they walked, even though he pretended he was too old for that kind of thing. Lily walked ahead, already pointing at store windows and planning her shopping strategy. They were halfway to the shoe store when Benjamin suddenly stopped walking. His hand slipped out of Victoria's as he stared at something in the center court of the mall. Victoria followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. There it was. A grand piano, sitting right there in the middle of everything, black and glossy under the mall's bright lights. It looked expensive, probably put there by some music store as an advertisement or display. A small wooden sign next to it read, "Please feel free to play." "Victoria, look," Benjamin shouted, his eyes wide with excitement. "Can we listen to someone play?" Before she could answer, Lily had already run back to join them. "Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Do you think anyone famous will play it?" Victoria felt her chest tighten. She couldn't take her eyes off the piano. The familiar shape of it, the way the light reflected off its polished surface, the knowledge of exactly how those keys would feel under her fingers. Cold at first, then warm, responsive, alive. "Come on, let's go," she said quietly, trying to steer the children toward the shoe store. "Wait." Lily grabbed her arm. "Victoria, do you know how to play piano?" The question hit her like a punch. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it again. What could she say? Yes? No? The truth was too complicated, too painful. She settled for a half smile and a shake of her head. "Not really, sweetie. Let's get your shoes before the store gets too crowded." But Benjamin wasn't letting it go. He had that stubborn look on his face that reminded her so much of his father. Not really means a little bit, though, right? "Can you play something? Just one song?" "Benjamin, no. I don't play piano." "Come on now." She started walking, hoping they would follow, but she could feel their curious eyes on her back. And worse than that, she could feel the pull of the piano itself, like it was calling to her across the mall. It had been 15 years since she'd touched a piano. 15 years since she'd run away from everything that instrument represented. They made it to the shoe store, and the twins tried on what felt like 50 pairs of sneakers. Lily couldn't decide between the white ones with pink stripes or the pink ones with white stripes. Benjamin wanted the ones that lit up when you walked, which Mrs. Montgomery would definitely hate. Victoria went through the motions, nodding and smiling and offering opinions, but her mind was somewhere else. She kept thinking about that piano, wondering if it was in tune, wondering if the keys were weighted properly or if they were those cheap electronic ones that felt all wrong, wondering what it would feel like to play again after all these years. "Victoria," Lily's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you okay? You look sad." Victoria blinked and realized she'd been staring at nothing, holding a shoe in her hand without seeing it. She forced a bright smile onto her face. "I'm fine, honey. Just tired. Did you decide which ones you want?" After they finally settled on shoes, they walked back through the mall toward the parking garage. Victoria tried to take a different route, one that wouldn't pass by the piano, but Benjamin noticed and complained. He wanted to see if anyone was playing it now. Against her better judgment, Victoria let him lead them back to the center court. A small crowd had gathered. Some teenage boy was sitting at the piano playing what sounded like a pop song. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't particularly good either. His timing was off, and he kept hitting wrong notes and laughing about it with his friends. Still, people were watching, some recording on their phones. Victoria found herself analyzing his technique without meaning to. His hands were too tense. He was hitting the keys instead of pressing them. No wonder it sounded harsh. If he just relaxed his wrists a little, if he curved his fingers properly. "You're doing it again," Lily whispered next to her. "Doing what?" "That thing. Where you stare at the piano like it's the only thing in the world." Victoria looked down at the little girl. Lily was smart, too smart sometimes. Those big brown eyes saw everything. "I was just listening to the music," Victoria said softly. "No, you weren't. You were looking at his hands, like you were playing in your head." Before Victoria could respond, the boy finished his song and stood up, taking an exaggerated bow. His friends cheered. The crowd clapped politely and started to disperse. The piano sat there empty, waiting. "Please," Benjamin said suddenly, tugging on her sleeve. "Just try, just once. I really want to hear you play." "Benjamin, I told you, but you do know how." "I can tell." "Lily's right. You look at that piano like it's important to you, please." Victoria felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She couldn't explain to these children why she couldn't play. How could she tell them about the pressure, the expectations, the way music had gone from being the thing she loved most in the world to being a cage that suffocated her? How could she explain standing on the stage at Carnegie Hall at 19 years old, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't play, the audience murmuring, the shame burning through her entire body? How could she tell them about her parents, about the accident, about the guilt that lived in her chest like a stone? "Maybe another time," she whispered. But as they walked away, Victoria couldn't help it. She turned back one last time, just a quick glance over her shoulder. The piano sat there in the fading afternoon light coming through the mall's skylights, beautiful and terrible and full of everything she'd lost. Benjamin saw her look back. She didn't know it then, but that one glance, that moment of weakness would change everything, because those twins had inherited their father's stubbornness, and once they latched onto something, they never let go. And they had just decided that their quiet, mysterious maid was hiding something worth discovering. The twins wouldn't let it go, not even a little bit. It started the very next morning at breakfast. Victoria was making pancakes, her usual Sunday routine, when Lily casually asked, "So, Victoria, if you could play any instrument, what would it be?" Victoria knew exactly what she was doing. These kids were clever. "I don't know, sweetie, maybe the guitar? That seems nice." "Not the piano?" Benjamin chimed in, his mouth full of pancake. "Don't talk with your mouth full," Victoria said automatically, avoiding the question. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, piano seemed to be everywhere. When Victoria came to wake the twins for school on Monday, she found a music book on Lily's nightstand, classical piano pieces. On Tuesday, Benjamin asked her to help him with his homework, and somehow his research project for school had mysteriously changed from the solar system to famous piano players in history. Victoria tried to ignore it. She went about her daily routine, cleaning the penthouse, doing the laundry, preparing meals. But the twins were relentless in the most gentle way possible. They weren't being pushy or bratty about it. They were just curious. And that somehow made it harder to brush off. On Wednesday evening, during their usual movie time, Victoria settled onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn between her and the twins. They were supposed to be watching some animated movie about talking animals. Instead, 15 minutes in, Lily picked up the remote and switched to YouTube. "Oops," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Wrong app." But she didn't switch back. On the screen, a woman in an elegant black dress was sitting at a grand piano in a concert hall. Her fingers moved across the keys like water flowing, and the music that poured out was so beautiful it made Victoria's chest ache. She knew the piece. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. She'd played it herself once, a lifetime ago. "Isn't that pretty?" Lily asked innocently, watching Victoria's face instead of the screen. "It is," Victoria admitted quietly. "It's very beautiful. Do you think it's hard to play?" Victoria couldn't help herself. The notes themselves aren't that complicated, but playing it with feeling, Making it sound like that takes years of practice. And you have to understand what the composer was trying to say. Chopin wrote this when he was homesick, missing Poland. You can hear the sadness in it, but also the beauty of his memories. She stopped talking abruptly, realizing she'd said too much. Both twins were staring at her with wide eyes. "How do you know all that?" Benjamin asked softly. Victoria stood up quickly, grabbing the empty popcorn bowl. "I must have read it somewhere. Come on, it's getting late. Time to brush your teeth." That night, lying in her small room on the third floor, Victoria couldn't sleep. The music kept playing in her head. She could feel her fingers moving under the blanket, pressing invisible keys, muscle memory that 15 years hadn't erased. She'd thought she could run away from it. She'd thought if she just never touched a piano again, the pain would fade. But it hadn't. It had just gone quiet, waiting. Thursday afternoon brought a new development. Victoria was folding laundry in the main bedroom when she heard the twins whispering in the hallway. They weren't trying very hard to be quiet. "I'm telling you, she knows something," Lily was saying. "But what if we're wrong? What if she just likes music?" Benjamin replied. "Nobody looks at a piano like that just because they like music. Did you see her face at the mall? She looked like she was seeing an old friend she missed." Victoria's hand stilled on the shirt she was folding. She should probably let them know she could hear them, but something stopped her. "So what do we do?" Benjamin asked. "We need to find out more. Maybe there's something online." What was her last name again? Victoria's heart started beating faster. No, they wouldn't. They couldn't possibly. But she'd underestimated just how determined these kids could be. Friday evening, Victoria's phone buzzed while she was preparing dinner. It was sitting on the counter and she glanced at it while stirring the pasta sauce. A text message notification lit up the screen. The preview showed the sender's name. Maestro Kowalski. She hadn't heard from him in over a year. Her old teacher, one of the few people from her past life who still checked in occasionally. The message preview read, "Thinking of you today, the anniversary of your Carnegie Hall." Victoria grabbed the phone and turned it face down, her hands shaking. But not before Lily, who had wandered into the kitchen for a snack, caught a glimpse of the screen. "Who's Maestro Kowalski?" Lily asked, trying to sound casual as she grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. "Just someone I used to know," Victoria said, her voice coming out too tight. "Is he a music teacher? Maestro means teacher, right?" "Lily, honey, can you go set the table, please?" The little girl studied her for a moment, then nodded and left. But Victoria knew that look. The wheels in Lily's head were turning. That night, after the twins were supposed to be asleep, Victoria walked past their room on her way to the kitchen for some water. She heard the soft glow of a tablet screen under Benjamin's door and the sound of whispered voices. She should have knocked, should have told them to go to sleep. Instead, she pressed her ear to the door. "Look at this one," Benjamin was saying. "International Tchaikovsky competition. That's a big deal, right?" "Super big deal," Lily confirmed. "It says here she was only 16. Benjamin, this is her. It has to be. Look at the picture." Victoria's blood ran cold. They'd found it. Somehow, these 10-year-old kids had managed to dig up her past. Articles she'd hoped were buried deep enough in the internet that no one would ever find them. "Victoria Chen, piano prodigy," Benjamin read aloud. "Wins gold medal at wow, she was amazing. But then what happened? There's articles about her winning all these competitions and then nothing. They just stop." "It's like she disappeared," Lily said quietly. "Why would someone who was that good just stop? That doesn't make sense. Maybe she got hurt or sick, or maybe something really sad happened." There was a long pause. Victoria held her breath, her forehead pressed against the cool door. "We have to talk to her," Lily finally said. "But we have to be nice about it. If something bad happened, we don't want to make her feel worse." "Do you think that's why she looked so sad at the mall? Maybe playing piano reminds her of something painful." "Probably. But Benjamin, what if? What if she misses it? What if she wants to play again, but she's too scared?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. These children, these sweet, stubborn children, saw right through her. Then maybe we can help her, Benjamin said. Like she helps us with everything. Victoria quietly backed away from the door and went to her room. She sat on her bed, hands shaking, and pulled out the bottom drawer of her nightstand. Hidden under some old sweaters was a small wooden box. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside was a medal. Gold, heavy, with Russian writing engraved on it. Next to it was a photograph creased from being held too many times. A teenage girl at a piano, her parents standing behind her, all three of them smiling like they had the whole world ahead of them. Victoria traced her finger over her mother's face, then her father's. "What would you tell me to do?" she whispered to the photograph. "Would you want me to play again? Or would you be disappointed that I gave up?" She knew they couldn't answer. They'd been gone for almost 13 years now, killed by a drunk driver 6 months after her breakdown at Carnegie Hall. 6 months after she'd decided she couldn't handle the pressure anymore, that she was done with piano competitions and concerts and everyone's expectations. She'd never played for them again, never got the chance to show them that she could do it differently on her own terms, for the love of music instead of the weight of their dreams. The twins knew her secret now. By Monday morning, she'd have to face them, and somehow she'd have to find the words to explain why the most talented thing she'd ever done was also the thing that had broken her heart. Victoria barely slept that night. She kept rehearsing conversations in her head, trying to figure out what she'd say when the twins confronted her, because they would confront her. She knew these kids well enough to know they wouldn't just let this go. Morning came too quickly. She dragged herself out of bed, splashed cold water on her face, and went downstairs to make breakfast. Her hands moved on autopilot, cracking eggs, buttering toast, pouring orange juice into glasses. The kitchen was silent except for the sizzle of the pan. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. 2 sets moving slowly, nervously. Lily and Benjamin appeared in the doorway, and Victoria knew immediately that this was it. They were both holding something. Papers, printed articles. Her stomach twisted into a knot. "Good morning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Scrambled eggs okay today?" "Victoria," Lily said quietly, walking to the kitchen island. She laid the papers down on the marble countertop, spreading them out carefully. "We need to talk." Victoria's hands froze on the spatula. She stared at the papers. There she was, 16 years old, holding a trophy that was almost as big as she was. Another photo showed her at a piano mid-performance, completely lost in the music. There were headlines. "Teen prodigy takes gold at Tchaikovsky competition." Victoria Chen, the future of classical piano. "Young pianist brings audience to tears." "We're sorry," Benjamin said quickly. "We know we shouldn't have snooped. But Victoria, you were famous. You were like really, really good. Why didn't you tell us?" Victoria turned off the stove and gripped the edge of the counter. Her knuckles went white. For a long moment she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. All those memories she'd locked away were flooding back, and she wasn't ready. She'd never be ready. "Please don't be mad," Lily whispered. "We just wanted to understand." Something in the little girl's voice broke through Victoria's panic. She looked at them, really looked at them, and saw that they weren't trying to hurt her. They were worried. These kids, who had everything money could buy, were worried about their maid's feelings. Victoria pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "I'm not mad," she said finally. I haven't talked about this in a very long time." The twins immediately sat down on either side of her, like they were afraid she might run away. The eggs were getting cold on the stove, but none of them cared. "What happened?" Benjamin asked gently. "The articles just stop. One day you're winning competitions and then nothing." Victoria took a deep breath. "How much do you two know about pressure? Real pressure, not just homework or chores." They both shook their heads. "My parents were immigrants," Victoria began, her voice soft. "They came here with almost nothing. My mom cleaned offices at night and my dad worked in a restaurant kitchen. When they discovered I had a talent for piano, they saw it as a way to give me a better life. They spent every penny they had on lessons, on a piano, on sending me to competitions." She picked up one of the photos, the one with her parents in it. "I loved playing. I really did. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about the music. Every performance became about proving their sacrifice was worth it. Every competition was about not letting them down. The better I got, the more pressure there was. Lily reached out and took Victoria's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around Victoria's palm, warm and solid. When I was 19, I performed at Carnegie Hall. It's one of the most famous concert halls in the world. I was supposed to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. I'd practiced for months. I knew every note by heart. Victoria's voice cracked. But when I walked onto that stage and sat at the piano, I couldn't do it. My hands started shaking so badly I couldn't even position them on the keys. The orchestra was waiting. The audience was waiting. Everyone was waiting. And I just froze. "What did you do?" Benjamin whispered. I stood up and walked off the stage. Just left. I could hear people murmuring, confused. Some people thought I was sick. But I knew the truth. I couldn't handle it anymore. All those years of pressure had finally crushed me. She wiped at her eyes, surprised to find tears there. My parents were devastated. Not angry, just sad. They felt like they'd pushed me too hard. We barely spoke for months. I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and they were trying to understand where things went wrong. Victoria paused, steadying herself for the hardest part. Then 6 months later, they were driving home from the grocery store. A drunk driver ran a red light. They died instantly. Lily made a small sound, almost like a whimper. Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. The last real conversation I'd had with them was an argument about piano, about whether I'd ever perform again. I'd told them I was done, that I couldn't do it anymore. My dad said I was throwing away my gift. My mom cried, and then they were gone, and I never got to tell them. She couldn't finish the sentence. Benjamin got up and hugged her, wrapping his arms around her neck. A moment later, Lily joined in. The three of them sat there in the kitchen, holding each other while Victoria cried for the first time in years. When she finally pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve, she felt lighter somehow. Like telling the story had released something she'd been carrying for too long. "I became a maid because I needed to do something simple," she explained. "Something where nobody expected anything from me except clean floors and warm meals. I needed to disappear from that world where I was Victoria Chen, the prodigy. I just wanted to be Victoria the person." "But you still love it," Lily said. It wasn't a question. "Piano, I mean. You still love it." "I could see it on your face at the mall." Victoria nodded slowly. "I do, that's the hardest part. I thought if I stopped playing, the pain would go away. But it didn't. I just ended up missing it, missing them, missing the person I used to be. I felt stuck." Benjamin pulled back and looked at her seriously. "Do you think your parents would want you to never play again?" The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. She'd asked herself that same thing 1,000 times, but hearing it from this 10-year-old boy made it feel different. More real. "I don't know," she admitted. "I used to think they'd be disappointed that I quit. But maybe they'd just want me to be happy." "I think they would," Lily said firmly. "Parents want their kids to be happy. That's like the number one thing." Victoria laughed through her tears. "When did you get so wise?" "We have a really good maid who taught us to think about other people's feelings," Lily said with a small smile. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning sun streaming through the kitchen windows. Victoria felt exhausted but also strangely peaceful. These children had found her secret, confronted her about it, and instead of judgment or pity, they'd offered understanding. "Victoria," Benjamin said carefully, "what if you tried again? Not the big concerts or competitions, just playing, for yourself." "I don't know if I can." "Maybe you could start small," Lily suggested. "Like really small, just touching a piano, seeing how it feels." Victoria thought about the piano at the mall sitting there in the middle of all those people. The idea terrified her. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she'd been running from her fear for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to face it. "What if I freeze up again?" she asked quietly. "Then you freeze," Benjamin said with a shrug, "and we'll be right there with you. And nobody dies. Nobody gets hurt. You just stand up and walk away and we go get ice cream or something." It was such a simple way to look at it, such a kid's perspective. Not everything had to be life or death. Not every performance had to be perfect. Maybe playing piano could just be playing. "I'll think about it," Victoria promised, and she meant it. 2 weeks passed after that conversation in the kitchen. Victoria went about her daily routine, but something had shifted. The twins didn't push her about piano, but she'd catch them watching her sometimes with hopeful expressions. They'd started leaving little things around, A YouTube video of someone playing Beethoven Left paused on the family tablet, a quote about courage taped to the refrigerator. Nothing pushy, just gentle reminders that they believed in her. On a Thursday afternoon, Lily came home from school with a flyer. "There's a talent show at school next month," she announced, dropping her backpack by the door. "Benjamin and I are thinking of doing something together." Victoria was folding laundry on the couch. "That's nice, sweetie. What are you thinking? Dancing, singing?" "We don't know yet," Lily said. But there was something in her voice that made Victoria look up. The little girl had that scheming expression again. "Lily Montgomery, what are you planning?" "Nothing." But she was smiling. "Just thinking." Victoria shook her head, but she was smiling too. These kids were something else. That Saturday, Benjamin suggested going to the mall again. They needed new notebooks for school, he said. Victoria agreed without thinking much about it. It wasn't until they were walking through the main entrance that she remembered. The piano. It would still be there. Her steps slowed as they got closer to the center court. Sure enough, there it was. Someone was playing it today. A middle-aged woman playing what sounded like a hymn. She wasn't particularly skilled, but she was playing with joy. Her eyes were closed, and she was swaying slightly with the music. "She looks happy," Benjamin observed, stopping to watch. Victoria couldn't argue with that. The woman wasn't performing for anyone. There was no pressure, no judgment. She was just playing because she wanted to, because it made her feel something good. The woman finished, smiled to herself, and walked away. The piano sat empty again. "Come on," Victoria said quickly, steering the twins toward the notebook store. But her heart was pounding, and she couldn't stop glancing back at that piano. They got the notebooks. They got pretzels from the food court. They window shopped and talked about school and whether they should get a dog. Normal Saturday stuff. But the whole time, Victoria could feel it pulling at her. The piano. The possibility. As they were heading back to the parking garage, Lily suddenly stopped walking. "Victoria, can we just sit down for a minute?" My feet hurt. It was obviously a lie. They'd barely walked anywhere. But Victoria played along, finding a bench near the center court. The piano was maybe 20 feet away. Right there. Close enough to touch if she just stood up and walked over. "You know," Benjamin said casually, like he was just making conversation, "I read that the hardest part of doing something scary is starting. Once you start, it gets easier." "Did you read that in school?" Victoria asked, knowing exactly what he was doing. "YouTube, actually. Some guy talking about facing your fears." Lily leaned against Victoria's shoulder. "Do you remember the first time you ever played piano? What did it feel like?" Victoria closed her eyes, letting the memory come. "I was 5. My mom took me to a neighbor's house. They had this old upright piano in their living room, out of tune and kind of beaten up. I pressed one key, just one, and I remember thinking it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard." "So it wasn't scary at all," Lily said softly. "No, it was magical. It felt like discovering something I didn't know I'd been looking for." "Maybe it could feel like that again," Benjamin suggested, "if you just tried. Just one key, just to see." Victoria opened her eyes and looked at the piano. A young couple was standing near it, debating whether to play. The guy sat down and played chopsticks while his girlfriend laughed. They were having fun. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people making noise and enjoying themselves. "What if I can't do it?" Victoria whispered. "What if I sit down and freeze up again?" "Then you stand up," Lily said simply. "And we go home. And nothing bad happens. The world doesn't end." Victoria felt tears prickling her eyes again. When had she become such a crier? Before the twins came into her life, she'd gone years without crying. Now it seemed like every other day these kids were breaking through her walls. "Will you come with me?" she asked, surprising herself. "If I try, will you both come with me?" "Obviously," Benjamin said, like it was the stupidest question in the world. "That's why we're here." Victoria laughed shakily. "You two planned this whole thing, didn't you?" The notebooks. Lily's tired feet. All of it. They both grinned, not even trying to hide it. "You're sneaky," Victoria said. "Your parents would be proud." She stood up before she could change her mind. Her legs felt shaky and her hands were already trembling. The twins stood up with her, one on each side, like bodyguards. They walked together toward the piano. With each step, Victoria's heart beat faster. She could turn around. She could make an excuse. She could run away like she'd been doing for 15 years. But Lily's small hand slipped into hers, warm and trusting, and she kept walking. They reached the piano. Victoria stood there staring at the keys. Black and white, perfectly arranged, waiting. Just an instrument. Just wood and strings and ivory. Nothing to be afraid of, but it was so much more than that. It was every memory of her parents watching her practice. Every competition she'd won. Every expectation she'd carried. It was Carnegie Hall and the sound of her own failure. It was guilt and grief and love and loss all wrapped up in one glossy black surface. "You don't have to play a song," Benjamin said quietly. "Just touch it. Just see how it feels," Victoria nodded. She pulled her hand from Lily's and moved it toward the keys. Her fingers hovered over middle C. She remembered this note. It was usually slightly out of tune on old pianos. It was the note her teacher had always used to start warm-ups. It was the beginning of everything. She pressed down. The note rang out clear and pure and perfect. The piano was in tune. Of course it was. Some music store probably maintained it carefully, hoping to sell more pianos by letting people fall in love with this one. Victoria pressed another key, then another. Not a song, just random notes. Testing, remembering. Her right hand found a simple melody, something she'd played as a child. Her left hand joined in, adding harmony without her even thinking about it. Muscle memory. Her body remembered even if her mind had tried to forget. A few people nearby stopped to listen. Victoria didn't notice. She was somewhere else now, somewhere beyond fear and guilt. She was 5 years old again, discovering magic in her neighbor's living room. She was 10, playing her first recital. She was 16, lost in the joy of Tchaikovsky. She wasn't at Carnegie Hall. She wasn't freezing. She was just playing. The melody grew, became more complex. Her fingers moved faster, more confident. She transitioned into a piece she'd loved as a teenager, a nocturne by Chopin. Not the whole thing, just the opening phrases. Just enough to remember what it felt like to speak through music instead of words. A small crowd had gathered, but Victoria barely registered them. Lily and Benjamin were right there, one on each side of the bench now, watching her face instead of her hands. They saw what she couldn't see yet, the way her expression had softened, the way years of tension had melted from her shoulders, the way she looked, for the first time since they'd known her, completely at peace. Victoria played the final notes and lifted her hands from the keys. For a moment there was silence. Then applause erupted around her. Not just polite golf claps, but real applause. Enthusiastic and warm. She looked up, startled, seeming to realize for the first time that people had been listening. There were maybe 15 or 20 people standing around, some recording on their phones. An elderly man in an expensive suit was watching her with an intense, focused expression that made her nervous. "That was amazing," Lily squealed, hugging her. "I told you," Benjamin said, grinning. "I told you that you could do it." Victoria felt dizzy, overwhelmed, but also something else. Something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was called. Joy. Pure, simple joy. She'd played piano again. After 15 years of running, of hiding, of believing she'd lost this part of herself forever, she'd played. And the world hadn't ended. She hadn't frozen. She'd just made music, and it had felt like coming home. Victoria stood up from the piano bench, her legs still shaky, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. The crowd was dispersing, people moving on with their shopping, but a few lingered. The elderly man in the expensive suit was walking toward her, and something about the way he moved, purposeful and direct, made Victoria nervous. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cultured and warm. "I apologize for intruding, but I simply had to speak with you." That was extraordinary. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly, instinctively putting her hands on the twins' shoulders. Protection mode. She didn't know this man. He seemed to sense her wariness and smiled gently. "Forgive me. I should introduce myself. My name is David Rothstein. I'm the director of the City Philharmonic Orchestra." Victoria's breath caught. She knew that name. Everyone in the classical music world knew that name. "I was here with my grandchildren," he continued, gesturing to 2 teenagers who were watching from a distance. "They dragged me to the mall for new headphones, and I heard you playing. I recognized the piece, of course, but more than that, I recognized you." "I don't think we've met," Victoria said carefully. "No, but I saw you perform once, many years ago. You were just a teenager. It was at a competition in Boston. I was a judge." He paused, studying her face. "You're Victoria Chen, the prodigy who disappeared." Lily and Benjamin looked up at Victoria with wide eyes. A director of an actual orchestra. This was bigger than they'd imagined. I don't perform anymore, Victoria said, her automatic response after years of hiding. I can see that, David said gently, and I'm not here to pressure you. But I am curious. What brought you back to a piano after all these years? Victoria glanced down at the twins. These two. They're persistent, David laughed. The best things in life usually require a little persistence. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. I'm going to give you this, and I want you to think about something. No pressure, no expectations. Just consider it. Victoria took the card hesitantly. The orchestra is planning a special concert series in 3 months, David explained. We're calling it Second Chances. It features musicians who stepped away from performing and found their way back. People who have real stories, who've overcome real struggles. I think your story would resonate with a lot of people. I couldn't, Victoria said immediately. I'm not ready for that. I just played a piano for the first time in 15 years and barely made it through one piece. 3 months, David said calmly. That's 12 weeks. You'd be surprised what you can accomplish in 12 weeks when you're playing for the right reasons. He looked at the twins, then back at Victoria. I think you've already discovered that it's different when you play for love instead of obligation. He started to walk away, then turned back. Think about it. And Victoria, what you just did, playing here today after everything you've been through, that took more courage than any concert hall performance. You should be proud of yourself. After he left, Victoria stood there holding the business card, her mind spinning. Lily tugged on her sleeve. Victoria, that's amazing. A real orchestra wants you to perform. I can't do it, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why not? Benjamin asked. Because I'm not that person anymore. I'm not a performer. I'm just what? Lily challenged. Just someone who plays beautifully? Just someone who made all those people stop and listen? Just someone who looked happier in the last 10 minutes than we've ever seen her? Victoria didn't have an answer for that. They drove home in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. Victoria's mind was racing, playing through possibilities and fears. By the time they pulled into the parking garage of the Montgomery building, she'd almost convinced herself to throw the business card away and forget the whole thing. But when they got upstairs, the twins had other plans. We need to call Mom and Dad, Lily announced, pulling out her tablet. Why? Victoria asked, alarmed. Because this is important, Benjamin said simply. Before Victoria could stop them, they'd video called their parents. Mr. Montgomery's face appeared on the screen, looking slightly harried. He was in an airport somewhere, judging by the crowds behind him. Kids, this isn't a great time. I'm about to board a flight to London and... Dad, Victoria's a famous piano player, Lily blurted out. Mr. Montgomery blinked. What? She used to be a prodigy, Benjamin added. Like internationally famous. And today she played at the mall and the director of the City Philharmonic wants her to perform with them. For a moment, Mr. Montgomery just stared at the screen. Then Mrs. Montgomery's face appeared next to his. Did I hear that correctly? Victoria, our Victoria? Victoria had no choice but to step into the frame, feeling her face burn with embarrassment. It's not as dramatic as they're making it sound. She won the Tchaikovsky competition when she was 16, Lily said, holding up one of the printed articles. Mr. Montgomery looked genuinely stunned. Victoria, why didn't you ever mention this? Because it's in the past, Victoria said quietly. I stopped performing a long time ago. But she's starting again, Benjamin insisted. And she needs help. She needs time to practice. She needs to not worry about cooking and cleaning for a while so she can focus. Mrs. Montgomery had tears in her eyes. Victoria, is this true? Do you want to perform again? That was the question, wasn't it? Did she want to? Playing at the mall had been terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The thought of a concert hall, a real performance, made her stomach twist with anxiety. But underneath that fear was something else. A tiny flame of desire that she'd thought was extinguished forever. I don't know, Victoria admitted. I'm scared. The last time I tried to perform in front of a real audience, I couldn't do it. I failed. You were carrying too much weight, Mr. Montgomery said gently. You were trying to live up to everyone else's expectations. But what if this time you only had to live up to your own? We'll help, Lily said firmly. We'll do our own laundry. We'll make our own snacks. We'll be super quiet when you need to practice. And we're hiring additional help, Mrs. Montgomery added immediately. If you want to do this, Victoria, you should have every opportunity to focus on your music. We can handle the household details. I don't even have a piano to practice on, Victoria said, and even as she said it, she realized she was making excuses, looking for reasons to say no because yes was too frightening. Mr. Montgomery smiled. There's a music room on the second floor that we've been using for storage. It has a grand piano that belonged to my mother. I don't think anyone's played it in years, but we can have it tuned. It's yours if you want it. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. Why are you all being so nice to me? I'm just the maid. No, Mrs. Montgomery said firmly. You're family. You've taken care of our children for 3 years. You've been there for every scraped knee, every bad day at school, every bedtime story. Let us take care of you for once. That night after the twins were in bed, Victoria stood in the music room. Someone had already called a piano tuner who'd arrived within hours. Rich people magic. The piano was beautiful. A Steinway grand that probably cost more than Victoria had earned in her entire life. It gleamed in the soft lamplight. She sat down at the bench and lifted the fallboard, revealing the keys. They were pristine ivory and ebony, barely used. She pressed middle C again like she had at the mall. The notes sang out, pure and clear and perfectly in tune. Victoria began to play. Not Chopin this time, but something she'd been composing in her head for years without realizing it. A melody that spoke of loss and longing, but also of hope, of running away and finding your way back home, of being broken and putting yourself together differently, not quite the same as before, but still whole. She played until her fingers ached. Played until she could feel her mother and father in the room with her, not watching with expectation, but just listening, just there. She played until she could separate her love for music from the pain of her past, until she could imagine standing on a stage not as Victoria Chen the prodigy, but as Victoria Chen the survivor, the person who fell apart and found the courage to try again. 3 months later, Victoria stood backstage at the City Concert Hall. She was wearing a simple black dress that Mrs. Montgomery had insisted on buying. The twins were in the audience with their parents holding a banner they'd made. Lily had shown it to her before the performance. It said, "Our hero never needed saving. She just needed friends." Victoria's hands were shaking, but not like they'd shaken at Carnegie Hall all those years ago. This was different. This was nerves, yes, but also excitement, anticipation. She wasn't playing for her parents' dreams tonight. She wasn't playing to prove anything or live up to anyone's expectations. She was playing because she wanted to, because music was part of who she was, and denying it had been like denying herself the air to breathe. The stage manager gave her the signal. Victoria walked out onto the stage, and instead of the panic she'd felt 15 years ago, she felt peace. The spotlight was bright, the audience was silent, and the piano waited for her like an old friend. She sat down, positioned her hands, and began to play. Not Rachmaninoff this time, but the piece she'd composed that first night in the music room, a piece about second chances,
about falling and rising,
about 2 stubborn children who saw something in their Maid tea.